and that is that my computer is too smart for the projector that we have. There's a cable missing, so I can't show you the slides that I had prepared that have pictures of Jung and pictures of Freud and Emma Jung, and so you can come look at them later. I'm really happy that you've all come to join us in listening to excerpts from the letters between Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. There are 360 letters, and we only have an hour tonight. These letters written are very long most of the time, and they encompass a lot of topics, so we're only going to hear a fraction of them tonight. And these are excerpts, not full letters. I want you to remember that. I'll give you a little background. 121 years ago, in 1896, Freud first used the term psychoanalysis. And in 1897, he embarked on the self-analysis of his own unconscious. That's what led to writing The Interpretation of Dreams, with a print date of 1900. The book sold poorly, and it was not reviewed adequately. Carl Jung read the book when it first came out, and then he set it aside. In late 1900, he received his medical diploma and started his first professional post at the Bergolzi Mental Hospital in Zurich. He mentions Freud's dream investigations in his doctoral dissertation, and he continued to read Freud and cite him in his own work. So Carl Jung started word association experiments. He developed those, and it gained him an international reputation. He started using psychoanalysis methods, Freud's, on his patients at the hospital. And he used his influence to spread Freud's ideas among his colleagues. In 1906, Jung sent a volume that contained a paper he'd written, Psychoanalysis and Association Experiments, to Freud. Freud thanked him with a short note, and there the matter lay. In October of 1906, Freud sent Jung the papers he called Short Papers on the Theory of Neuroses, and Jung responded, and that's when the correspondence really began, lasting about 6 years. So tonight, in these excerpts from 1906 to 1913, you will see the relationship between these two men, how it burgeoned from a mutual admiration and appreciation to this tragic ending of misunderstanding and bitterness. You'll also hear some letters about Sabine Spielrein. Some of you went to the movie My Name Was Sabine Spielrein that BFJ showed this past summer in its movie series. And it also was a fictionalized account in the movie A Dangerous Method, I think is the name of it. I've also included a few letters from Emma, Carl's wife, to Sigmund Freud, and I'll tell you more about those in 1911, when we reach that year. But right now, I'd like to introduce to you our readers. Reading as Carl G. Jung is Cynthia Kneen. And reading as Sigmund Freud is Billy Patton. And reading as Emma Jung is Elizabeth Robinson. From time to time, I'm going to interrupt to tell you important information that was on the slides and things that you just need to know. So the first thing I want you to know is that at this juncture in 1906, Jung is 31, almost 31 years old, and Freud is almost 50. Thanks. Let's start.
April 11th, 1906. Dear colleague, many thanks for sending me your diagnostic association studies, which in my impatience I had already acquired. Of course, your latest paper, Psychoanalysis and Association Experience, pleased me the most, because in it you argue on the strength of your own experience that everything I have said about the hitherto unexplored fields of our discipline is true. I am confident you will often be in a position to back me up, but shall also gladly accept correction. Yours sincerely, Dr. Freud.
5 October 1906. Dear Professor Freud, please accept my sincerest thanks for the present you kindly sent me. This collection of your short papers should be most welcome to anyone who wishes to familiarize himself quickly and thoroughly with your mode of thought. In my opinion, the merits of your theory are to be found in the psychological realm, of which modern psychiatrists and psychologists have somewhat too scanty a grasp. What has helped us here in our psychopathological work are your psychological views, whereas I am still pretty far from understanding the therapy, and the genesis of hysteria, because our material on hysteria is rather meek. That is to say, your therapy seems to me to depend not merely on the affects released by abreaction, but also on certain personal rapports. And it seems to me that though the genesis of hysteria is exclusively, it is predominantly, it is not exclusively sexual. I take the same view of your sexual theory. Harping exclusively on these delicate theoretical questions, one forgets the essential thing, your psychology, from which psychiatry will one day be sure to reap inexhaustible rewards. I hope to send you soon a little book of mine, in which I approach dementia praecox and its psychology from your standpoint. In it, I have also published the case that first drew Bleuler's attention to the existence of your principles, though at that time with vigorous resistance on his part. But as you know, Bleuler is now completely converted. With many thanks, very truly yours, C.G. Jung.
Dear colleague, your letter gave me great pleasure. I'm especially gratified to learn that you have converted Bleuler. Your writings have long led me to suspect that your appreciation of my psychology does not extend to all my views on hysteria and the problem of sexuality, but I venture to hope in the course of the years to come, you will come much closer to me than you now think possible. On the strength of your splendid analysis of a case of obsessional neurosis, you more than anyone must know how consummately the sexual factor hides, and once discovered, how helpful it can be in our understanding and therapy. I continue to hope that this aspect of my investigations will prove to be the most significant. I am eagerly awaiting your forthcoming book on dementia praecox. I must own that whenever a work such as yours or Bleuler's appears, it gives me the great and to me indispensable satisfaction of knowing that the hard work of a lifetime has not been entirely in vain. Yours very sincerely, Dr. Freud. April 7th, 1907. Dear colleague, your visit was most delightful and gratifying. I should like to repeat in writing various things that I confided to you by word of mouth, in particular that you have inspired me with confidence for the future, for I now realize that I am as replaceable as everyone else. And I could hope for no one better than yourself, as I have come to know you to continue and complete my work. I am sure you will not abandon the work. You have gone into it too deeply and seen for yourself how exciting, how far-reaching, and how beautiful our subject is. Fazzola's paper, which he sent me recently in a very impersonal way, and probably out of sheer piety, does not strike me as honest. The appended remarks are the product of a personal cowardice that gives reason to hope that the man will come to a bad end. He deserves a rap on the knuckles for his piety, but we have better things to do. Yours cordially, Dr. Freud.
11 April 1907. Dear Professor Freud, many thanks for your long and exceedingly friendly letter. I only fear that you overestimate me and my powers. With your help, I have come to see pretty deeply into things, but I am still far from seeing them clearly. Nevertheless, I have the feeling of having made considerable inner progress since I got to know you personally. It seems to me that one can never quite understand your science unless one knows you in the flesh. Where so much still remains dark to us outsiders, only faith can help. But the best and most effective faith is knowledge of your personality. Hence, my visit to Vienna was a genuine confirmation. Bleuler has now accepted 70% of the libido theory after I demonstrated it to him with a few cases. His resistance is directed chiefly at the word itself. Of course, you are right about the word libido, but my faith in the efficacy of sweeteners is deep-rooted for the present. Bizola? Bizola is a confounded fusspot who has to compensate for a highly disagreeable position in life and thinks he can get rich off the crumbs that fall from the master's table. A hoarder of details with no clear overall vision, but otherwise a decent fellow, still in the grim clutches of the unconscious. I found his paper infuriating. With best regards and gratefully yours, Jung.
On February 17, 1908, Freud changed his salutation from dear friend and colleague to simply dear friend. Jung noticed at once.
20 February 1908, dear Professor Freud, I thank you with all my heart for this token of your confidence. The undeserved gift of your friendship is one of the high points in my life. The reference to Fleiss, surely not accidental, and your relationship with him impels me to ask you to let me enjoy your friendship, not as one between equals, but as that of father and son. This distance appears to me fitting and natural. Moreover, it alone, so it seems to me, strikes a note that would prevent misunderstandings and allow two hard-headed people to exist alongside one another in an easy and unstrained relationship. Yours very sincerely, Jung.
April 14th, 1908. Dear friend, this letter will be waiting for you when you get home. I'm sorry to hear that you've been unwell and that you'll be obliged to take a short holiday rather than a long one. With your youthful stamina, you ought to make short shrift of any illness. 3 of your papers are lying on my desk. The first, the one you did in collaboration with Bleuler, displeases me with its hesitations and concern over the good opinion of E. Meyer. You have forbidden me to speak of the second, your long-awaited Amsterdam report. The third, which is the 3rd number of my papers on applied psychology, is a pure delight. With its resoluteness and clarity, and as befits such clear thinking, the language is enchantingly warm and beautiful. How boldly here you proclaim the psychic etiology of psychic disorders from which you shrank back in the other papers. In this one, to be sure, you were free to express your own opinion. You were speaking only to laymen and ladies. In the others, you were hampered by the spirit of compromise and by concern over the prejudices of physicians and the incomprehension of our colleagues. Oddly enough, I have been reading in your Amsterdam paper that child hysteria does not enter this context, whereas I myself have been toying with the idea of working up my analysis of a hysteriophobia in a 5-year-old boy for the Congress. But I doubt if this plan will be carried out. Yours cordially, Freud.
18 April 1908. Dear Professor Freud, your last letter upset me. I have read a lot between the lines. I don't doubt that if only I could talk to you, we could come to a basic understanding. Writing is a poor substitute for speech. Nevertheless, I will try to offer a rather incoherent explanation. The Amsterdam report. Here I have done bad work, as I am the first to admit. In spite of this, I shall be grateful for any criticism. It's nonsense about me forbidding you to speak of it. I can only learn from your criticism. The chief drawback is its brevity. I had to do a lot of cutting. A second and more important drawback is the elementary approach that was forced on me by the ignorance of the public. Child hysteria must fall outside the formula applicable to adults, for whom puberty plays a large role. A specifically modified formula must be established for child hysteria. All the rest I have written as my conscience dictated. I am really no propagandist. I merely detest all forms of suppression and injustice. I am eager to hear of my errors and hope to learn from them. Most sincerely yours, Jung.
Dear friend, happy Easter. Hard feelings must not be nursed. If I was cranky and seemed so, there is much more room, in this case, for a somatic than a psychogenic etiology. I am so exhausted by work and lack of recreation that I shall surely make the same impression on you in Salzburg. What I mean is, I am not at all angry with you. My letter is being written under the impression of my second reading of your content of the psychoses, for which work I do feel great affection. It gives me a picture of you from several different angles. It has in it a great deal of what I esteem in you, not only your insight, but also your fine artistic feeling and the seeds of greatness. After all, it has never been my habit to reproach you with partial disagreements, but rather be pleased with your share of agreement. I know it will take you time to catch up with my experience of the past 15 years. I am rather annoyed with Boulder for his willingness to accept a psychology without sexuality, which leaves everything hanging in midair. In the sexual processes, we have the indispensable organic foundation, without which a medical man can only feel ill at ease in the life of the psyche. I thoroughly dislike the notion that my opinions are correct, but only in regard to a part of the cases. That is not possible. It must be one thing or the other. These characteristics are fundamental. They can't vary from one set of cases to another. Or rather, they are so vital that an entirely different name should be given to the cases in which they do not apply. Thus far, you know no one has seen this other hysteria, dementia praecox, etc. Either a case is of our kind, or nothing is known about it. I am sure that basically you agree with me. There. Now I have avowed the full extent of my fanaticism and venture to hope that the injury to your feelings will not survive the interval that separates us from our meeting in Salzburg. A chat with you there will do me at least a world of good. Yours cordially, Dr. Freud.
What was in effect the first International Psychoanalytic Congress took place at Salzburg on Monday, 27 April 1908. 42 participants, including Boulder, having arrived the day before. 9 papers were read, including Jung's on dementia praecox and Freud's on a case history. Freud spoke for over 4 hours.
April 1908. Dear Professor Freud, I am in two minds as to whether I should apply a business or an emotional yardstick to the Salzburg Congress. On balance, the results were very good, and this bodes well for the success of our Jahrbucher. As to sentiments, I am still under the reverberating impact of your lecture, which seemed to me perfection itself. All the rest was simply padding, sterile twaddle in the darkness of inanity. With regard to dementia praecox, I now realize, actually I have always realized, what an endless amount of excavation is still needed in order to dig up anything and present it with certainty. Unfortunately, there was no physical and psychological opportunity in Salzburg for discussing my particular case. Meanwhile, I am going ahead patiently with my work. I beg you to have patience with me and confidence in what I have done up till now. I always have a little more to do than just be a faithful follower. For by faith alone, nothing prospers in the long run. With kind regards and many thanks, Most sincerely yours, Jung.
Dear friend, so you too are pleased with our meeting in Salzburg? It refreshed me a good deal and left me with a pleasant aftertaste. I was glad to find you so flourishing, and every suspicion of resentment melted away, and when I saw you again and understood you, I know you are in a phase of negative oscillation and are now suffering the counter effects of the great influence you have exerted on your chief all this time. It is not possible to push without being pushed, but I am quite certain that after having moved a few steps away from me, you will find your way back and then go far with me. I can't give you any reason for this certainty. It probably springs from a feeling I get when I look at you. But I am satisfied to feel one with you and no longer fear that we might be torn apart. You will just have to be patient with some of my idiosyncrasies. As ever, Freud.
We are skipping ahead 9 months now to go directly to the Spielrein affair in the letters.
7 March 1909. Dear Professor Freud, I didn't want to write to you until I could definitely say when I am coming. The fixing of this date is particularly difficult for me. Since I am still chained by the neck, I also have to consider the wishes of my colleagues. The last and worst straw is that a complex is playing Old Harry with me. A woman patient whom years ago I pulled out of a very sticky neurosis with unstinting effort has violated my confidence and my friendship in the most mortifying way imaginable. She has kicked up a vile scandal solely because I denied myself the pleasure of giving her a child. I've always acted the gentleman toward her. But before the bar of my rather too sensitive conscience, I nevertheless don't feel clean. And this is what hurts the most, because my intentions were always honorable. But you know how it is. The devil can use even the best of things for the fabrication of filth. Meanwhile, I have learned an unspeakable amount of marital wisdom. For until now, I had a totally inadequate idea of my polygamous nature, despite all self-analysis. These painful yet extremely salutary insights have churned me up hellishly inside. But for that very reason, I hope, have secured me moral qualities which will be of the greatest advantage to me in later life. The relationship with my wife has gained enormously in assurance and depth. Most sincerely yours, Jung.
Dear friend, I too have had news of the woman patient through whom you became acquainted with the neurotic gratitude of the spurned. When Muthman came to see me, he spoke of a lady who had introduced herself to him as your mistress, thinking he would be duly impressed by your having retained so much freedom. But we both presumed that the situation was quite different, and that the only possible explanation was a neurosis in his informant. To be slandered and scorched by the love for which we operate, such are the perils of